All right, the meeting is called to order. It's 6:30. It will be recorded. So the first thing I need to do, do I go around and, is anyone here?
I was just counting to make
Okay.
sure I was seeing who's online.
Is anyone online?
Randall Friends and Tim Reed.
Do I go around again for people? Okay, so then the first thing I need to do, since we have separated these building committees, is to appoint a clerk to take minutes. So I've appointed Lisa Lavina, who has graciously said she would do it. So we'll move on quickly to appointing the, approving the minutes of the joint building committees meeting from February 15th. Does anyone have any comments or changes that they'd like to make?
Motion to approve minutes of February 15th.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed or abstentions? Great, thank you.
Can you declare it unanimous?
I'll get it 1 point. That was unanimous. Okay, on to the Collier's report and updates. John.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So we'll start with the finances. Not a lot to update on the finances, similar to last month. I believe the only difference is another Collier's invoice. What I've discovered, and I don't think I brought this up to the committee last month, was that we are going to be billing at a flat rate of $8,200 from here through bidding. So every month you're going to see an invoice from Collier's for that amount. So our services will fluctuate as through the course of that process, but the bidding will be consistent, so there shouldn't be any surprises there. So that's the financial update. We've yet to receive an invoice from Design Lab, as far as I know, but when those start coming in, we'll obviously log and report that. But that's it for the financial update. I'll move on to the hazmat procurement, the hazmat consultant procurement. So I think I mentioned last month that we had solicited hazmat consultant proposals from a short list of consultants that we had worked with in the past. I believe that the analysis that I put together had been shared with the committee on the website. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but I'll just give it.
So I'm going to interrupt for a quick
Yeah.
moment. I think that falls under the full building committee that would have to authorize the hazardous mitigation, not the, we're doing the exterior design.
Oh, so I don't have any updates. Sorry, I thought that something was a little out of order. Okay,
All right.
that's it for me then.
Thanks, John. All right, we'll move on to Design Lab. So Andrew.
Yeah, I guess if we could pull up the slides, we'll briefly go over the schedule to start. I think we're still not quite used to the exterior building committee, so we'll go over the schedule again for when the full building committee is here as well, but it'll be a brief update. We jump to slide 6. So we are obviously at our second workshop. We're quickly approaching the end of schematic design, but things that we've done since the previous workshop is we've gotten our geotech borings, which I believe are in the lab right now. We also spoke to the fire department last week, and we talked to Chris, the children's librarian, I believe on the same day that we talked to the fire department. So we garnered some additional information. The fire department, we talked strictly about the cistern and the complexity involved and the access required. And then with Chris, we strictly focused on the children's library and possible adjacent programs, but that's it. So we're carrying the information through that we've heard from you guys and from the previous interviews, and we're adding additional information. As these next few weeks rapidly approach, we are going to create a set of drawings that will be priced, which starts at the end of next week, which one will be submitting the drawings to the estimator. And that will take roughly 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, we would like to go on few precedent tours, which I'll follow up with later on in the presentation, building committee, but those are for, I believe, exterior and interior. And then we'll still be moving the design forward during the estimate with the schedule that's definitely required. I can move on. So to start, if you, next slide, please. For the exterior building committee, last meeting, we kind of set some guiding principles. We all talked about what we wanted. It was all relatively new information for us. So we took some time to digest that. And in this presentation, I'm not going to show anything complete, anything put together at all. There's not going to be pretty renderings. We're bringing you along for the design process. And this is where we need your input on. So you'll see how we kind of carried through some of these ideas and where we'd like you to bring in your ideas. So some of the guiding principles were the character of the addition should be rooted in the context that defines Stowe. It should feel distinct yet complementary, and it should be its own gem. It should be a balanced composition, cueing from the defining elements of the original library. That's going to be a huge part of what we talk about today. And the composition should include natural materials, fieldstone, copper, slate, woods, all natural, mostly organic materials, and not all glass. Slide. Just an original image that we use, that we kind of keep on our screens all the time to remember what the building really was. Right now, you don't have this view at all. There's a lot of missing elements now in the current building. But with that view, if you wouldn't mind moving, you can start to see the original design of the building and where it kind of fit into American history. It's the style called Richardsonian Romanesque. It's a very well studied style. It's considered the first American architectural style, created by one of the great American architects, H.H. Richardson. And here are some of his buildings on the bottom, plus our library. But some of the 5 defining elements of Richardsonian Romanesque architecture is a clear, strong, picturesque massing, round-headed arches that create a recessed entry, so very delicate but unique entry, and very clear entry as well. Probably the most defining element is a rusticated material, blank stretches of walling contrasting with bands of windows, and the key element on Stowe is the cylindrical tower with conical caps embedded in the walling. So all these are very clearly within the Randall Library. It fits perfectly into this Richardsonian Romanesque design. And so with those in mind, or I'd like you to keep those in mind as we move through some of the next diagrams. So we took the front elevation of the building and broke it down by a few of these elements, but also just some rhythmic elements within the building. And if you go to the next slide, that back is removed and you can start to see the kind of vertical rhythm that moves pretty equally across the whole building. There's a very pivotal tower on the right sides, and there's just a few horizontal elements that break up the elevation. And there's a very proud base that unfortunately you can't really see anymore, but the intention of these buildings was to have a very proud base, a very clear base, because Richardsonian Romanesque was defined as permanence. It was represented America in its permanence and its monumentality. And so the base was a big part of that. And then there's some minor ornaments on Randall, but in some other projects there's even more ornaments. And then with that, once you start to add materials, you can really start to bring out the building and see and bring it all together. And so how do we kind of use that as a springboards to design over 100 years later? So what we started to do was bring out the vertical rhythm to the extent of our massing. And the first step that we'd like to do in the next slide is create something that we've been calling a gasket, which would be a clear separation between these two buildings. So there's not a fight anymore going on, and it does start to bring out the base of the building and the verticality and the horizontality, and then that actually really continues like clearly through, except the rhythm possibly of the verticality. And then use a smaller base so it doesn't compete with the existing base. And you can see also on the top of the verticals that it's not competing with the size of the building and the height of the roof, which was a distinct feature and why, you know, it's a library hill, because it's a tall library. And then some minor horizontals that will most likely align with the existing, but still broken by the gasket. And then the opening is going to be in the entrance will be a fantastic design experiment almost for us of how do we complement the original oval opening that's defining part of all of these buildings across New England, and how do we complement that but still create it just as an inviting opening. It's kind of the one part of this building that should be almost equal to the original historic opening, because it will be used more in all honesty. So, and then how do all those elements get materialized and manifested? So this is where we would love your input. You guys have lived in the town for, I'm not sure how long everybody's lived here, but some of you probably for a very long time. And so what would fit within the town? What would fit within the town center? What complements not just the building, but possibly the town itself? So I've done a few exercises here that I find compelling, but they're just exercises. So here there's a stone base with vertical wood slats and a slate roof, a probably rather small slate roof with a glass gasket. But on the next slides, okay. On the next slide, I switched the gasket to actually be wood slats with a vertical wood or window rhythm throughout, potentially with the same top and the same base. But there's all sorts of different combinations here, and the materials are going to be really important in these conversations. And there's all these different variables into each material. So if you go to the next slide, there's potential to even use two different bricks. The bricks could be stacked in a soldier rhythm, so they're straight up and down, or in a normal running bond. And the colors could be different on the base versus the top, or the colors could be in the gasket versus the main addition. Or I did one last minor exercise. The whole building could be just a single monolithic element. This is Corten steel. We don't recommend this, but the idea still stands that it doesn't have to be a composition of a bunch of modern materials. It could be a rather monolithic element. So I'd love to get your opinion. The next slide, everything's kind of put together. What do you guys think?
I have a question. Are you envisioning the addition as you have drawn, like as a flat roof, or will it have any, I don't know what you would call this, but like a pitch to it, like where you would see the details of slate, like a slate roof that would match potentially the original structure? Or is it just going to be flat where people aren't going to see that element, that design element anyways?
It's a bit of like the horse and cart, because if the roof is flat, we wouldn't have a slate roof or a materialistic roof. But if we do think that that massing is required to have like a mansard roof or something, or pitched roof, then we would want that material to be clear and important to the building, because the existing building has a slate and copper roof, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And has lasted a really long time. So we do want to complement that, or make it even clearer with a flat roof, which would really define the massing of the rest of the building.
Andrew, can you go to the slide where you had the Richardsonian precedents next to Randall?
It is slides. Sorry, I also have a slow computer. 10.
So this is great. I think super helpful, and I think it really illustrates the abstract things that you distilled from it. There's a couple differences, whereas the precedents are a little bit more like this ribbon with a bunch of really tight ribbon windows. It's almost like a big ribbon window. This has more punched.
Yeah.
And I like that you've picked up on that and carried that through. I think that would be a really good rhythm in the library. So I think that's really successful and a great way to have them talking to each other without imitating each other. The buildings on the left are mostly rough granite with some sandstone trim. And our building is sandstone trim with brick. So it's a little bit more modest, I think. So I think doing anything like granite would be a little bit more like a city. So I think right there's something still about that. And it's not literally brick necessarily, but something a little bit more simple. And the geometry is pretty clean. In the material boards that you had, if you could go to any one of those.
Let's go to 24.
So the red brick there, probably almost everybody has got like a wood stove in their house and a big brick chimney. Almost everybody.
Mhm.
And the brick probably looks just like that. Even if it's like a mid-century modern, it was like a really rough kind of red brick. The brick in the library is nicer than that brick, though. It's smooth, it's consistent. It's got a super thin joint that you would never have today. But I think the mortar is actually even red, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it reads very monolithic.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit more refined than you would get in a domestic building there. So I think that's an important level of something to pick up on. I actually like the Corten steel. I like
Kind
that.
of looks
I
close.
I mean,
to
it actually looks a lot like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if I haven't done anything with that in a long time, but like if that doesn't break the budget, I think that could actually be a really nice complementary solution that would be in dialogue. It might be cheaper than brick, I don't know. I also like the charcoal brick to be in dialogue with the slate, if the slate isn't there, something kind of going back and forth. And maybe there's some opportunity also for, if it does end up being masonry, to have some precast dyed elements that we call the sandstone, or even, we probably can't afford sandstone. I love wood slats on buildings. And I worry about the maintenance of them. You
Yeah.
showed a precedent from the Cape of the museum in I think
Yeah.
Provincetown. And I think they just replaced the entire facade
Really?
after
Yeah.
20 years. Which is probably something that you do in the Cape. Right? I mean,
Yeah,
you shingle your
Provincetown.
house.
It's
So
tough weather.
they
Yeah.
shingled their museum and then they reshingled it. So that's probably the only material that I worry about the maintenance of and really surviving. I love wood outside, but I think it works best when it's like in a softened material, maybe at the entrance or something where it's out of the sun and out of the rain, and so
Yeah.
you can get something warm in there. But I worry a little bit about it as the gasket.
We have used, we just finished a project recently on the beach in Boston and used black locust on all the exterior. which is basically the hardest wood that you can get. So there is potential to use that material if it's the right.
Yeah.
If it's the right
If you do like a
material.
tropical
and
wood that
it's the- Yeah,
silvers over time or turns whatever climate it wants to, and it just kind of gets a patina.
yeah.
That's different than something that has a nice clear finish. It's gonna
Right.
wear in age differently. So. The field stone on the bottom left, I like, but I don't know that we have anything like that in the existing building, right? I
Yeah,
think
that
it's
was
the
my
base.
question
The
too.
base is actually brick.
No,
Is
the
there
base
any-
is
Is the base
stone.
Can you, do you have a detail of that? 'Cause I can't
There's the
picture
old, the historic picture. That's why we've been kind of driving the stone a bit harder than the other
Yeah.
elements. Is because that base, which is covered now,
Oh, yeah, down the
Is-
bottom, yeah, you can't see it, yeah. But it's
Yeah,
under there.
awesome.
yeah, and we are planning on exposing that as
Oh,
well.
so
with
that-
the
Do you know what
landscape
kind of
design.
stone it is? Is it granite?
Right now, I think this is the only reference that I have to it, so.
So that's just my observations about what's unique about this building. I like your analysis a lot too. I think that was super helpful for identifying the elements and I acknowledge the challenge of the secondary entrance because all of these have got a main entrance. And we're talking about Cambridge Public Library and that entrance is not the entrance anymore.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
a
a really
compliment
tough
now.
thing to
Yeah.
do. And there's two entrances, so, yeah, and what you showed was like, there's like a slight arch, which felt a little like, it's kind of an entrance, but not as big, it's like a little bit of a compromise.
Yeah, again, like everything
Yeah,
in these
it's
drawings are just to.
Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah,
that's gonna be, it'll be a nice challenge.
yeah.
And one more question, you showed everything totally parallel, and we haven't seen the plans, and I know you're still working on them, but that's gonna have a big impact on how they talk to each other. Are the facades gonna be parallel, or is there gonna be an angle based on,
That front facade will be parallel.
okay,
The plans have adjusted a little bit, but that front facade has mostly stayed the same. So that is a good point to bring up, though. One reason why these are still this diagrammatic is because they're incredibly dependent on the plans.
Yeah.
As well, on the programming inside.
Even though they'd be parallel, would the addition be set back?
Yeah, it will all be behind the tower.
Right.
oh, nice.
So when you say parallel to what?
Par- so
each
like-
other.
To the original.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
so
so
it's supposed to
got it,
rotate.
okay, it's not gonna bend.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
but it'll be further set back.
Have you, in your exploration, found any examples of Richardson's buildings with recent additions?
There are some, yeah, the Cambridge Public Library, the Woburn Library, which is mostly a glass box extended off, which is generally the response that people do. I don't know yet whether to think of that as the kind of easy solution. Because it does make like for a beautiful space inside, because you bring the exterior elevation into the interior and you can see that all the way through normally is the goal of that kind of solution, but I've found that generally is how they've been renovated in the past few years.
Can you talk about, Andrew, about where you were talking about mimicking the punched out windows? Are you talking?
Yeah, I think there was a slide or two before this, actually, you can see right there where it says vertical. And so there's about, it's not only AB rhythm is AAA, the solid and glass are exactly equal or approximately equal. And that pattern carries over there. So that suggests to me that you would have tall punched windows, maybe over there, or even if not some expression of that rhythm in proportion
Okay,
versus being square windows or long horizontal windows.
okay. So that would not apply if it was a glass box, really?
It could apply if it was.
Different
You could-
way,
You could absolutely do that.
Break it up in a
Box.
certain way.
I mean, and that's why this is a good abstract diagrams, because it's completely independent of materials. You can express any of those materials with that proportion.
Would it be possible, if there is red brick, to, use the same method?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not
there
look
could be
like
a
the
very
white
refined
mortar.
way of doing the brick where it does fit into this rhythm, whether it's a horizontal or potentially vertical, or do these verticals double potentially in size or split in half in size. And
But with the
all of that.
narrow mortar, or red mortar, whatever.
Just do a dyed mortar, but you can't get a
You can,
1/8 inch mortar anymore.
I have done it, but it's, yeah, people wouldn't want to on such a big building. It would be an added cost, basically, I
Okay.
get that. But the general idea of doing brick with this vertical rhythm is definitely part of this conversation.
Well, I would hesitate to put our typical white mortar brick next to
Yeah,
that.
but
red.
there's a million mortars, and you
Okay.
could get a
We
mortar
could get it to
dyed
complement
exactly
without
the
looking.
same, and you could make it look from distance monolithic, but close up enough that you can tell the difference between them, so you could play well. The thing about doing the brick is, if these are in dialogue with each other, that might allow you to do a more modern kind of detailing, if the materials are kind of more matched, or if materials are different, maybe you find something else to match it.
Go ahead.
I don't have an issue with using brick, but I'm concerned that it's gotta be different enough, because you're not ever gonna get the same brick. And if it's just
Yeah.
slightly different, it's gonna look terrible. But
That's
if
what we
you
have right
purposely
You want-
contrast,
yeah.
right?
That's what we have right now. We have two
No, I know.
different bricks that
I
come
know,
That
yeah,
together.
yeah,
are
that's-
almost the
that's
same,
not
but
fair
not
enough.
Exactly.
But if you have enough contrast, then
Right.
it won't
Yeah.
look like a mistake.
Yeah, I think actually that's the key, is really the brick has to be quite different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So even, even considering the 1/8 inch mortar line might be too much of similarity, in it, especially if it's a horizontal bond. So, but a brick you can do so much with, even though it's such a simple material.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just echoing
Hmm.
what he said, I think like. I get nervous about if it is too similar, like,
Yeah.
and we get a fail, like we, not a fail,
Orientation.
but yeah, I feel like. Using maybe a newer material or distinct materials is, I think, might be.
What do you think
aesthetically
about
pleasing.
some of these other materials? Whether it's,
I mean, you showed some copper last time too, that
Yeah,
looks
it was
really
really good,
cool. And again, I mean, I think the town's character, like, the natural, like, don't, like you were saying, like these organic materials, like, that's good. I wouldn't say like, I don't think putting a concrete, like the gray concrete would necessarily match with like the, tone of the town. Like, I think the town is farmy, the town is, has like a rural character to it.
Like a handcrafted.
Like a
versus
hand,
machine crafted.
exactly. That's kind of like,
And what did you call that upper right material?
it's
Corten
called
steel.
Corten steel.
So it's like plate steel that's rusted intentionally before you put it in, and it just has a natural finish, and stays that way
Doesn't
forever.
develop patina like a copper,
If
would,
that is the
That is-
patina,
yeah.
so it starts the permanent
but it's not
patina.
gonna turn green.
No,
No,
Okay.
it would stay that
Okay.
forever.
You guys use slate as a wall cladding, anything recently?
Not recently, but we have done it before. Slate is also a fantastic material potentially for this. The existing building gives us that material to use on everything but the roof potentially. So I'd love to consider that in a creative way somehow as well.
I really liked from your very preliminary design from the town meeting, the hip roof.
Yeah.
You don't have a picture of that, do you, the preliminary design?
I do not have it in this presentation.
So if we did use that roof, obviously, we would, want to echo, well, like you had echoed the material that was used
Yeah.
in the original building.
our roofs, like the slate roof, is that easier to mimic than like the brick situation? If you are trying to mimic like the slate roof, say you're going with another slate roof, is that easy to match, or is that again something that you want to steer clear of?
I think it is easy to match. I don't know an enormous amount of slate, but I just finished a project last week actually that has slate roof, and I'm pretty sure slate hasn't changed since the slate roof was invented. It seems very similar across the board. All the drawings and details are pretty straightforward.
Go ahead, Frank.
So the slate roof really isn't a permanent part of the building the way the brick wall is. Those get replaced over
been
time.
replaced.
The slate roof has been replaced.
I don't know if that, if it hasn't been, it'll probably soon.
It's been 50 years. Something like that.
It might have been done when they put the addition on.
It might have been, but my point is, we're not, that wouldn't be matching historic, then at some point, if in another 50 years, it might all get changed.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
it's not same as the
I
brick,
like the brick.
as a permanent.
So I appreciate your patience as we navigate this and we realize a half hour is way too little time. But since we're already at 7, do you want to talk about your field trip locations?
Yes, I believe that is, okay, just a few slides forward,
This one?
27. So we would like to go to our project in Concord with you guys, as well as the Woburn Library, which is H.H. Richardson Library with an addition, and the West Branch Library in Somerville, which both Ben and I worked on a few years ago. So we would like to schedule that. I understand that might be more difficult than just doing right now in this meeting, unless it's not. But if we could get that on the calendar in the next 2 to 3 weeks, that would be great.
What are your thoughts, exterior design committee, about doing a virtual solo meeting that has more time than this? Would that work for you?
That's
Yeah.
fine. Whatever you need.
Okay, just so that
That works for us.
we can dedicate what we need to this.
Why does it have to be work?
Well, I guess it doesn't if
And
we
I have
can
no
all
problem
find a
with doing
time.
more time. So, yeah, I agree. Nice to be around the table.
Okay,
But is the meeting, the purpose of this meeting, of the meeting you're talking about, just to pick a time for a field trip?
No.
Okay. Because that's what it kind of felt like to me, so I just wanted to make sure. Understood.
But with all of this said, we are planning on getting basically unit costs on these, on a handful of these materials. So we'll consider corten, wood, brick, slate, and stone probably. And then we'll be able to kind of massage that in with our estimate into the design to make sure that we're not completely overswinging something
Right.
or underswinging something.
okay,
Are we-
sorry, yep.
The idea of these locations that this group would take a trip together to all 3 of them on the same day? Or is that what you're trying to?
Yes.
Go ahead, Linda.
I'm Linda Hathaway. I'm probably the oldest family in town. Since I'm the 7th generation and my kids are the 9th generation. So my question has to do with, what does the view look like from another perspective? Because not too many people are gonna see that full landscape coming down Crescent Street or coming into the library, but you're gonna see a lot of it from the Great Road, Gleasondale. So I was just wondering how that looks from this different angle, or even from the east side of Great Road. Because that's really the piece that a lot of people will see.
Mhm.
So I just didn't know if you had that in your, any of your scope there.
So right now, we don't have every elevation defined. And that specific elevation is very dependent on the interior program as well. That is where we are pushing around the flexible meeting space. So for the next meeting, we will have those elevations more defined, including this elevation as well. But right now, we just don't have that, but we do definitely appreciate the importance of that elevation and how it's almost a welcome for the town. And it sits right in the common as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will be sending out two things. One, times for a joint field trip to these locations, and also a next meeting time that will give us more time to talk as a committee. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to bring up before we adjourn? Morgan?
Are both committees gonna be able to go on these field trips? And are we having transportation provided? Or are we all gonna just caravan to each of these places in one day? Or is that not decided
I
yet?
believe we are going to try to caravan with one of the Council on Aging bands if possible.
Okay.
I hadn't thought about whether both committees were going or not, but we can have that discussion if
Okay.
everybody wants to go. Yes,
Can we put the community input item on the agenda for the next, whatever our breakout meeting is gonna be?
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, then,
Motion to adjourn at 7:07.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Second.
Yeah, that was unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
And for those of you on the Zoom, there's another meeting link for the building committee meeting, the 2.0 meeting.
Thank you.